In this lesson, we are going to see how to work out a maximization problem in linear programming. We read the question. A farmer has 18 acres of land and plans to grow corn and beans. The cost per acre for corn is $30 and that of beans is $20. The farmer has a budget of $480. Corn requires 1 man-day per acre and beans require 2 man-days per acre. There are 30 man-days available. If the profit on corn is $90 per acre, while that of beans is $100 per acre, find the number of acres required for growing each crop so as to maximize the profit. How are we going to answer this question? First of all, to answer this question, we need to know something about the variables. That is one of our requirements before we answer this question. So for us to get the variables, then we read through the question and we find that we are being asked to find the number of acres required for growing each crop. So there are 2 crops. Variables are always 2 in number. So the first crop is corn and the second crop is beans. Now we let the corn be represented by letter X and we let the beans be represented by letter Y. So the first requirement is we must be able to have variables. The second requirement is that we must also be able to know the objective function. An objective function is also called a money function because it is used to either maximize profit or sometimes to minimize cost. Now from this question we can be able to see that the profit on corn is 90 per acre and the profit on beans is 100 per acre. Therefore we can come down and write our objective function simply as 90 x for corn and 100 y for beans. So that becomes our objective function. We can also include equals and a constant. But because I shall be using my graph to be able to come up with the maximum profit, then I leave it at this point. The next requirement before answering this question is that I must also be able to know my constraints. Constraints are restrictions. So for me to be able to answer properly, organize my constraint properly, I should be able to have a simple table that helps me organize my work. Therefore, the first variable, which is x corn, I write it at that point. The second variable is y. Then I identify my first constraint, and my first constraint is land. And from the question itself, I can be able to see that I have 18 acres that I need to use to plant corn and beans. Therefore, I can now be able to record here that I have what x and y, and that combination should be able to fit in 18 acres. So I cannot go beyond 18 acres. I can only come less than 18 acres or I can go to exactly 18 acres. And that is why this inequality comes in, less than or equal to. The second constraint that I am going to deal with is a constraint that has to do with cost. So I come here and I identify my constraint as cost, and now I can be able to see that for corn I need $30, for beans I need $20, but the farmer himself has a maximum of $480, so he cannot go beyond that, and therefore my inequality simply becomes less than or equal to 480. Then I also have my third constraint, and my third constraint is in terms of man days, and I can be able to see that maize or corn requires 1 man day, and the second one is bean, it requires 2 man days, and this should be less than or equivalent to 30. So these constraints are connecting these 2 variables, corn and beans. I also need constraint that deals with con alone. And the constraint that deals with con alone is x is greater than or equal to 0 and y is greater than or equal to 0. But I can also be able to plant a combination, various combinations of x and y to be able to get to 18. Therefore, up to that point, I can be able to see that I have 5 inequalities that I have been able to generate using those constraints. So my 5 inequalities are A, the first one is x plus y is less than or equal to 18. The second one that I have is 30x plus 20y. It gives me less than 480. And this equation I can be able to simplify by dividing it with 10 on both sides of the inequality to simply get 3x plus 2y is less than 48. My third constraint, inequality that comes from the constraint, is x plus 2y is less than 30. The fourth one is x is greater than or equal to 0. My fifth and last one is y is greater than or equal to 0. We shall remind ourselves on how to plot inequalities by looking at only this one equation. The rest of the equation, you just use the same method to be able to come up with them. So the first inequality is x plus y is less than or equal to 18. The first thing is to be able to draw the line x plus y equals to 18. Notice we have dropped the inequality sign for equal sign. So using the intercepts method, then I will have x and y, and I will suppose that what if x is 0? Y will be 18. Intercept method. What about if y was 0? X is simply 18. Therefore, it means I need to plot in terms of x and y 0, 18, and the second coordinate is 18, 0. So this is the line that I should be able to draw. Now notice that we have this inequality which is less than or equal to. So when I have the inequality less than or equal to, or the other inequality which is greater than or equal to, then I am going to use a continuous blocked line. When I have got less than and greater than signs in an inequality, then I am going to use dashed lines. But in this case, because I have got this sign less than or equal to, I am going to use a continuous line. And if you can look at my graph, then I have been able to plot it adequately, nicely, like I have been able to show on my graph at this point. Now the next thing is, where am I going to shade? Where am I going to shade this line? And for me, I can be able to use a test point. A test point. So my test point in this case is 0, 0, and 0, 0 is below this line, which is at this point. I am not going to choose another point on this side. So this point 0, 0 shall be my test point. So I take my test point and I put it into the inequality itself. X plus y is less than or equal to 18. Sorry. So I say 0 plus 0 is less than 18. So 0 is less than 18, which means that this is very true. So I am not going to shade the true side, I am going to shade the false side. So the false side, I shade it properly like this. So after plotting all the 5 lines that I have been able to identify using the inequalities, this being x equals to 0, this being y equals to 0, I have shaded them with red, both of them. Then the next line is this red one, which is 3x plus 2y equals 48. Remember the inequality? When you have drawn the line, identify the inequality using equal signs. This other line is, this purple line is x plus 2y equals to 30. Once I've been able to plot it and shade correctly, then I can be able to see that this area that is plain without any shaded, we call it the bounded region. It is bounded by some restriction, some constraints, or it is also called the feasible region. Feasible region is where we are going to either maximize or minimize, but for this question we have been asked to maximize. So I will use the corner method for me to be able to maximize the profit. So the corner method, I identify the coordinates of the corner. So the first coordinate is this one, the second coordinate of the corner is this one, the third coordinate of the corner is this one, the fourth one is here, and the fifth one is here. So if I am going to write them down, the first coordinate is 0, 15. The second coordinate that I can be able to see is 6, 12, this one here. The third one here is 12, 6, and the fourth one is 16, 0. Then the fifth one at this point is 0, 0. These are the coordinates that I have, and these are the coordinates that should help me to maximize profit. So again, I should be able to use a table for me to be able to maximize the profit properly. And I use x here, y here. So x is corn, y is beans. And then I say that my first coordinate was 6, 12. And if I say now, say 6 times 90, and then I also have 12 times 100, my total, my sum total of all of this should come up to 1740. The second coordinate that I used was 12, 6. So now again I can say 12 times 90 and then 6 times 100, and if I do the sum total of all of that, then I get my answer as 1680. My third coordinate that I am going to use is 15, 0, and if I say 15 times 90 and then 0 times 100, I am going to get that my answer is 1350. The next coordinate that I am going to use is simply 0, 16, and if I calculate, I get 0 times 90 and then plus 16 times 100, and I get my answer as 1600. The last coordinate is 0, 0, and if I look at it, it is 0 times 90, then 0 times 90, and if I calculate, my answer comes to 0. So I look at my total here. Which one is the largest total? This is the largest total, which is 1680. So I will need 12 acres of corn, and I will also need 6 acres of beans so that I can be able to maximize the profit.